Damon Martin, MMA Fighting, here with the president of one of the fastest growing sports and leagues in the entire world right now. Welcome back, BKFC president Dave Feldman. Dave, welcome back. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great, Damon. Always a pleasure, man.
Absolutely, absolutely, man. Coming off the heels of BKFC 18, what an incredible night of fights. I'm still getting tingles when I think about Thiago Alves and Uli Diaz. Obviously, you had Joey Beltran go out there and defend his title. 4 championship fights. Man, you had to be happy with that night.
It was a great night. We had a lot of hiccups putting that show together. First time at that venue, and some things happened that we weren't really anticipating, and we were able to come out of it really unscathed, and just a tremendous event. And I couldn't help but just keep looking over at the crowd. Our largest event and largest gate by double. So it was a phenomenal night for us. Just the way the fans reacted, the way the fighters fought, everything totaled, man, I give it an A+.
Absolutely. I got to ask you about that title fight I mentioned, Thiago Alves and Uli Diaz. Obviously, BKFC has had some tremendous wars over the years. We always think, of course, about, Artem Lobov and Jason Knight, and there's been more, of course, obviously in there. But, man, that was such an incredible fight. Like, I know they're not going to get booked in an immediate rematch, but I really hope we get to see that one again somewhere down the road.
Yeah, they want to fight each other again, so we are going to see what happens. Definitely. I mean, sometimes the rematches don't run it back the same as the original, but I can't see it going any other way. You got two guys that really don't know how to do anything else but go forward, so it's probably going to end up being a great match. But we have some other things lined up for November. November, we're going to go back to Miami, and some really cool things that hopefully we can get this contract signed for it and announced. It'll be really amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me ask you, another fight that took place earlier than the 4 title fights was Pearl Gonzalez making her debut. And I talked to Pearl just a couple of days after her fight. Now, you and I know we've had the same conversation over and over again. When someone's making their debut, fighting in BKFC, fighting bare knuckle is a whole other animal. And you don't really know what it's like until you get in there. I got to admit, I think Pearl Gonzalez had one of the most impressive debuts I've ever seen in BKFC. She looked so comfortable in there. She was sharp. She stuck to the basics, but she got the job done. I was super impressed by her performance.
Yeah, she followed her game plan, to perfection. She really, I don't even know how many times she got hit. Very, very few. She looked very, very good. We had a great conversation last week about her future. So we're excited to be in the Pearl Gonzalez business and really grow her.
Yeah. She told me, she's like, I'm all in. This is what I want to focus on. I'm all in on bare knuckle. And I love that attitude because you and I both know you got to put 100% into this sport because, again, it is a different kind of animal.
Yeah, but it's weird. And I know we're going to talk about her later, but, like Paige, for instance, like we didn't know if she was all in. And then she fought and lost, fought well, but lost. And she was all in even more after the fight than she was going into the fight. So it's like these girls, I mean, especially the girls, man, they get addicted to this thing, man. They love bare knuckle fighting.
I love it. Let me ask you about 2 particular incidents that happened at BKFC 18 before we move on to BKFC 19, and that was the post-fight incidents, Lorenzo Hunt and Hector Lombard. And of course, we saw didn't get bad, but obviously with Joey Beltran had a couple of guys coming in to challenge him, which was interesting. I know when the whole when the Jenny Savage Britton Hart thing happened, I know you were, I won't say upset about that, but you're like, we didn't anticipate that. We weren't trying to set that up. It's kind of a twofold thing because obviously you don't want something bad to happen, but at the same time, I can't lie and tell you that the post-fight video of Hector Lombard, taking a swing at Lorenzo Hunt was a massive. I mean, everyone was buzzing about it the next day. So as a promoter, like, how do you balance this in your head? Because those moments go viral. We're talking about them weeks later, but also as a promoter, you're kind of like, yeah, I don't really know if I want like punches thrown after the fight. You know what I mean?
I mean, I don't. It's weird, like you just said. I don't like it. I don't like the respect factor of it that they're doing that. But do I like that we had almost 100 million views on it? So, people that never watched or heard about Bare Knuckle Fighting Championship before I've heard about this. So, it's something we don't condone. We definitely do not condone. We don't look forward to. It's something we're going to try to combat as much as possible. But if it happens, it happens, and then we'll deal with it when it happens. But look, you get a guy like Lorenzo Hunt, who's been in there with, a lot of our fighters. He's undefeated with us. He lost once, I'm sorry, but he looks tremendous now. going in there against a hot Hector Lombard, who, a lot of people don't know, but Hector Lombard actually went into that fight with pneumonia, and we didn't know that, but we found out afterwards. So you got a guy that's sick, coming off a war, and someone jumps in his face. I mean, we don't ever want that to happen, but I mean, you got that testosterone going, and things happen. But what we do need to do better a job of at BKFC is not letting fighters in the ring after the fights. And, if that happens in the dressing room or somewhere else and something we just can't control, then it happens. But I mean, we have to do a better job of security around the ring, and we are.
Yeah. Yeah. I know you're not going to encourage it. And like I said, I remember when Dana White was flipping out about, Conor McGregor attacking, the bus with Khabib Nurmagomedov. And obviously I understand you don't want to condone that kind of behavior, but then, 6 months later when they're fighting, they're showing that video to promote the fight. I get it. Like, I understand, like, you don't condone it, but you can't deny that there is a certain level of promotion you got to take away from that, right?
Oh, look, we didn't want it to happen, and it's unfortunate that it happened. But at the same time, we promoted it afterwards, after the fact, because it was I would say not an amazing moment, but an epic moment. It was a moment that went viral, and these things are going to happen. We're in combat sports. We're not in ballet, right? It's never going to happen in ballet, but it's going to happen in combat sports. You get two guys heated at each other, and things happen. But we just have to combat it as much as we can. So it's nobody is in harm's way, if you will. But at the end of the day, when you're on the end of Hector Lombard's punches with bare fists, you're in harm's way.
Absolutely. If you know Hector Lombard, that's not the guy you want to step to, even accidentally. So I get it. Dave, let's talk about BKFC 19. Obviously, massive card coming up, just a matter of days away at this point. Paige VanZant making her return to action against Rachael Ostovich. I know we talked a little bit about this, as we were previewing BKFC 18, but the pressure's on Paige. We know Paige is quickly become one of the faces of your organization, and she's embraced it. I spoke to her a couple of weeks ago, and she's loving it. I mean, she loves the organization. She loves working for you guys. But at the end of the day, it's about wins and losses. And obviously, this is a big move for her, right? I mean, not to say there's no coming back from this, but she needs a win here.
No, but like you said, you and I talked about this before. She didn't look great in the first couple of rounds, very tentative, and then finished strong. So, we said after that fight, let's see how she looks her next fight. She should look a lot better and a lot more comfortable. But we can't say it again, right? We just can't say it again. So she has to come out here and do what she's been training to do and come out and win this fight and really win it convincingly, for not just BKFC, but for her fans to really back her in bare knuckle fighting. Look, if she has a war with Rachael Ostovich and loses a close decision, people are gonna back her. But if it's if it's not a great fight and she loses, people aren't gonna back her. But I really expect Paige VanZant to come in here more focused and more driven than she's ever been in her whole entire career. Because as we know, she launched her own fan site. She's making really good money right now. So it's not a money thing for her as much as it is a pride thing. And I think that's going to carry her through this fight.
Yeah, I'm sure you saw the story I did with Paige after I did that interview where she talked about, like, where she said leaving the UFC was the best decision she's ever made, between her fan site and what she's doing at BKFC. She's finally in a position where she considers herself financially stable, like for the first time in her career. When you think about, and again, I'm not taking digs at the UFC, but when you think about, how big Paige was, main evented a couple of fights, was a very big star doing Dancing with the Stars. To think that she wasn't making the kind of money to where she would feel stable in her career, that says a lot. I mean, what does it mean to you, Dave, that you are providing that outlet for fighters to where they're not just coming there fighting, but they're making a living. They're making you're turning people into, this is a legit thing. And to hear Paige say that, like, you got to love hearing that.
We talked about it earlier today in our room downstairs where we make our matches. And we were talking about why do these fighters blow up? And they blow up because, I said this to you before, there's 150,000 boxers in the world. There's 150,000 MMA fighters in the world. There's 300 or 400 bare knuckle fighters. So if you come over to our organization, you fight for a bare knuckle fighting championship, especially a pretty lady like Paige comes over and people go, oh my God, this girl is fighting bare knuckles. We got to check this out. Not that she went from UFC to Bellator or to PFL or to another organization and just fought MMA again. They probably would have followed her, but wouldn't have been that excited. They were excited because it was a curiosity factor. Oh my God, this girl is fighting bare knuckle. So when they come over to us and, the curiosity is there, it increases our viewers. It it brings new fans in, and it gives us the ability to do the right thing by them.
Absolutely. And I know this is, like I said, this is a rematch from a fight they had in the UFC. And I talked to Rachael right after the fight was made. And she told me, she was like, she felt like she was getting the better of Paige on the feet. Obviously, Paige got her on the ground and got the submission, but there's no submissions in BKFC unless you just tap out because you can't take any more punches. So, I mean, this is an interesting matchup, and I know Rachel's fired up for the rematch. Obviously, again, this is her first fight, but she sounds, from my conversation with her, she sounds pretty convinced that she's going to beat Paige VanZant.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, that's the great thing about this sport and what we're doing here is you just don't know, right? You just don't. What Rachael Ostovich shows up? Is she training her ass off? I don't know. I think she is. I think she's more focused than ever. I think she has something to really prove here as well. So they're both coming in with something to prove, and if they're both coming in with something to prove, I think it just has to be fireworks, Damon.
Yeah, I agree. And like I said, talking to Paige, I know Paige is, she's changed her training. She's down at Mundo Boxing down in Miami. She's taking it very seriously with that. And again, I think she knows. I mean, she knows. I mean, I talked to her. She knows the pressure's on to win here, but she sounds focused, and I love the attention she's paying to her career right now. Like I said, going and basically joining a boxing gym full time. That says a lot about the dedication she has to go out there. And she doesn't just want to be a BKFC fighter; she wants to be a BKFC champion.
No, she absolutely does. She wants to be at the best at anything that she does. And, you have to take your hat off to that. So she went down, she made the transition that she needed to do. She's getting the great training in, and, she has about 10 days to show the world what she's made of.
Absolutely. Let me talk about some of the other fights in this card. You guys are doing the influencer card on here, which I thought was really interesting. I mean, listen, we talked about it before. I know we've had conversations about Jake Paul, Logan Paul, the attention those guys are getting in the sport of boxing. We saw they did that TikTok versus YouTube boxing card, and it did tremendous. Like people were really paying attention to it. And listen, I'm a little older. I'm not gonna lie. I'm not as I definitely, I'm on social media, but I'm not paying attention to every influencer out there. But people pay attention. People are interested. Was that a big part of deciding to do this, to put these fights on? I mean, obviously you got Blueface, you got some other guys out there. These are interesting matchups, and we can't deny the interest.
No, absolutely. I'm still coin flipping in my head. Should I have done it or shouldn't I have done it? Because we had the purest, most brutal, really combat sport out there in the world. It's as real as it gets, right? And then when you throw these things on, people question your validity. But I want to do things that are going to bring more eyeballs to the sport. So if I can bring these total of 58 million followers between these three influencer matches to the table, and whether they buy the fight or they don't, this is going to expose our brand to 58 million more people in one way or another in some of the promotions they're doing, if they watch the fight or whatever it may be. So it was just really a form of marketing, adding it to 12 bare knuckle fights that we have on the card. It's not like we replaced 3 or 4 bare knuckle fights with these influencer matches. We're doing that in addition. So I think, I don't think it can be a bad decision now at this point, because they're all very evenly matched up fights, and they're going to be, inserted or intervened in between these bare knuckle fights. We're going to do 3 or 4 bare knuckle fights, then an influencer match, and 3 or 4 bare knuckle fights, and influencer match. So, it's not like you're going to be jammed up with these influencer matches, and they are competitively matched. I mean, you have guys that people are curious about, like Blueface, like Nick Ireland, like this kid DK, and these other kids that are fighting. I mean, like I said, 58 million total followers between the 6 fights. I mean, that's more than any bare knuckle card I've ever done in history. So to get that in addition to what we're already doing, I think it can only be a win for us.
Yeah, and I'm guilty a little bit. When I first hear about these kind of fights, I'm like, oh, the purity, the sanctity of the sport. But then I remember this has been going on for years. I know you come from a boxing background. I mean, this has been going on for years. For anyone lying to themselves and saying that, okay, now we're doing YouTube versus TikTok or rapper versus rapper, whatever it is, this has been going on for years. Anyone pretending that this is something, anyone saying this is something new is ridiculous. It's just a different kind of format. But I mean, Muhammad Ali was fighting Antonio Inoki, many, many years ago, and that was basically this with one of the greatest boxers in the history of the sport. So no one could say the sanctity of the sport and all that kind of stuff.
For sure. I mean, I get where they were coming from, but once they see the show there, I think when they close out on Bare Knuckle Fighting Championship 19, they're going to be really, really happy of what they saw for their whole entire event. We're going to have a bunch of great fights on there. 3 women's fights: Britain Hart versus Jenny Savage, Taylor Starling versus Cassie Robb, and of course the main event, Rachael Ostovich versus Paige VanZant. We have two of the best heavyweight bare knuckle fighters in the world right now fighting each other. Arnold AJ Adams, our former heavyweight champ, taking on 7-0 undefeated UK British bare knuckle champ Mick Terrell. So another great fight on the card. We just got so many great fights in this card, so I can't see how it could be a disappointment at the end of the night.
Absolutely. I know you've been putting a lot of attention on the women's divisions, and I'm not going to ask you to play matchmaker right now because we got to see how the fight, on the 23rd plays out at BKFC 19 with Paige. Obviously, you're Rachel. We got, as you mentioned, Taylor. You mentioned Cassie. You mentioned, of course, Britton Hart, who had a big win over Paige, and of course Jenny Savage, who really wanted to fight Britton Hart that night, I think. And now they're fighting in the BKFC room. But you obviously got Pearl Gonzalez, and I know we spoke before the possibility of bringing back Beck Rawlings, who was the queen of bare knuckle, and I know that's a deal that's still under the works. How big is the women's division for you guys right now, and how excited are you for the future of that beyond just Paige? But I mean, you've really started to really truly build up this division.
And we didn't stop now. I mean, we're signing a lot more girls as we're speaking right now. It's great. It's exciting because I think you have these women in this sport, right? So you have these kind of women in this sport, and they go, how can these girls fight with bare knuckles? And then they tune in and watch them fight. And some of them, most of them are some of the best fights that we've ever seen, men or women, fighting in the women's division of bare knuckle fighting championship. So I think they just add a little something different there, a little different flavor, and they have the tenacity and the great fights that you would come to imagine you're watching at bare knuckle fighting championship. And there are two women doing it. So it's phenomenal. It just adds, like I said, it adds a different flavor to us. And I think it's awesome that we're able to build up these women because people go, women can't be fighting or women can't do this. Well, look, they're fighting bare knuckle fighting championship in the purest form of combat that there is known to man right now. And they're fighting their asses off and looking great. So, I'm going to continue growing the women's division and giving the fans what they want.
Yeah, it's so crazy to me. I had a conversation with Clarissa Shields, several months ago before she made her MMA debut, and she talked about kind of almost like a sadness about, how women's boxing is just ignored, women, not giving them, the higher places on the card, not letting them headline. You think about what MMA has done. I mean, you think of, obviously one of the biggest stars in the history of sport being Ronda Rousey. You look at Amanda Nunes, what she's doing right now. You look at Chris Cyborg, and then what you guys are doing in BKFC. I mean, you could argue, some of your biggest stars are women. It's kind of crazy, to think about how women have become truly a huge part and a massive part of combat sports promotion. It's unfortunate boxing didn't catch up, but BKFC is kind of leading the way along with MMA, giving women a real platform where to fight.
I agree 100%. I think it's more that they're like, wow, these women are fighting. I think that's more of what it is and the kind of fights that they're doing now. In boxing, it's a great sport. Like I said, I love boxing. I've been in there all my life. But the women's fights especially, you're not getting these real all-out wars with the women. In bare knuckle fighting, you can't help but have a war. So it's always a great fight, no matter if it's men or women. And then when you get these two women in here, banging it out in the bare knuckle fighting championship squared circle, it's just a phenomenal atmosphere. And we're just going to continue growing the women's division and giving the fans what they want. Like I said, I love watching these women fight now because they give it the raw. It's like they have something to prove. And when you have something to prove, you do the best you can.
Absolutely. Well, Dave, BKFC 19, July 23rd in Florida. It's going to be a tremendous event. And I say that because I've watched every BKFC card, and they're always fun. The production value is fantastic, and you guys are just killing it right now. So best of luck in the show. I'm sure we will catch up afterwards. Looking forward to see what else you got going on the rest of this year. And thank you as always for taking the time for me, Dave. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Damon. I always appreciate your support. Appreciate it, bud.